Not a call. Not a message. Not even a damn text. I turned 75 that day, and my phone stayed colder than the old shed out back. At 8:15 p.m., I opened Facebook, something I hate doing, and there they were, my sons, their wives, my grandchildren, all dressed up at some fancy steakhouse. Balloons in the background. A cake. My name wasn't on it. I wasn't even mentioned. That chair at the end of the table? I built that family from nothing, and they didn't even notice I was gone. So I picked up the phone, and called my lawyer. I didn't always feel like a stranger to my own name. There was a time, God, it feels like another life, when birthdays were sacred in our house. Especially mine. Marjorie made sure of that. Every July 6th, without fail, she'd bake me her cinnamon apple cake, even when money was tight and the flour was rationed between dinners and lunches. She'd gather the kids, Tommy, Aaron, and sweet little Elise, and they'd burst into the bedroom yelling, "Wake up, old man," before climbing all over me with hugs and sticky kisses. It wasn't a perfect life, but it was ours. I worked the docks during the day and did plumbing jobs on the weekends. Some weeks, my knees felt like rusted hinges, but I always made it home in time for supper. Marjorie believed in the magic of small things: dinner by 6, one light on in each room, soft jazz on Sundays, and birthdays as a way of reminding each other, you still matter. When she passed, that was the first thing to change. I still remember Elisa's 13th birthday, just 6 weeks after the funeral. I was a wreck, but I pulled myself together to bake the same chocolate fudge cake her mom always made. It collapsed in the middle, the icing looked like mud, but Elise hugged me so tight I thought I'd break. Mom would be proud, she whispered. And maybe she would have been. Back then, the kids still leaned on me. Tommy used to call for advice about mortgages and leaky faucets. Aaron, the middle one, visited on Saturdays. He'd bring groceries, just because. Elise, my baby girl, was always near. She'd sit beside me during Sunday dinner, always stealing a bite off my plate and laughing when I scolded her. We had traditions. Every Thanksgiving, I'd carve the turkey and tell the same corny joke, "Don't gobble it all up." They groaned, but they waited for it. On Christmas Eve, we'd all gather around the fireplace, and I'd read Marjorie's favorite passage from the old book she loved. Elise always cried at the end. And every year on my birthday, even after Marjorie was gone, they made an effort. A card. A phone call. Once, they pooled their money and got me a recliner, ugliest thing you ever saw, but comfortable as sin. It squeaked, but I refused to get it fixed. That squeak sounds like love, I used to say. But somewhere along the way, that love got quieter. Phone calls turned into texts. Then texts became silence. I chalked it up to life. They had families, careers, schedules. I told myself, don't be selfish. I told myself that more than once. Still, I kept doing what I'd always done. Tommy needed a loan for his daughter's braces. I gave it. Aaron needed help with a down payment. I offered before he could ask. Elise went through a messy divorce. I paid her lawyer and held her hand through every court date. No questions asked. You do that for your children. That's what Marjorie would have wanted. She always said, love them through their mess. That's when they need it most. And I did. For decades, I kept this house, Marjorie's house, standing. I kept her roses blooming out front, even when arthritis turned pruning into a battle. I fixed leaky faucets, rewired lamps, even painted the porch every 3 years. This house was more than walls and a roof. It was a memory we lived inside. Birthdays were the one day I let myself miss her out loud. I'd sit in her old rocking chair on the porch, light her lavender candle, and whisper stories she never got to hear. Some years the kids would join. Most years, they'd call. And that was enough. Until this year. It wasn't just that they forgot. It was how loudly they celebrated somewhere else. Without me. Without a word. As if I had never mattered at all. And that's when everything I had worked for, the hours, the sacrifices, the lonely nights, started to feel like sand slipping through my fingers. It didn't happen all at once. That's the cruel part of it. The distance crept in slow, like a draft through a cracked window. Barely noticeable at first, until one day, you're freezing and can't remember when you stopped feeling warm. Tommy was the first to change. The oldest. He used to call me every Sunday after church, just to shoot the breeze. Then it became once a month. Then, only when he needed something. Hey Dad, know anyone who can fix a sump pump, or any chance you can co-sign this thing for me real quick? Always real quick. He started calling me Pops in a way that didn't feel affectionate anymore. More like, condescending. A gentle pat on the head from a man who thought he knew better now. Aaron was subtler. He never stopped visiting, but he started bringing Melanie, his wife, every time. And Melanie, God bless her, always acted like she was doing me a favor just by sitting on my couch. She'd wrinkle her nose at the smell of old books or the creak of the floorboards. Once, I offered her coffee, and she said, "Oh, we don't do instant anymore." Like I'd offered her a spoonful of mud. I laughed it off. I kept laughing it off. That's what you do when you're scared to admit your place is changing. Then came the little things. I'd talk about Marjorie, and someone would change the subject. I'd bring out old photo albums, and they'd flip through like they were reading the back of a cereal box. One afternoon, I asked Tommy if he wanted my old tools, real craftsman stuff, things I've had since 1968. He smiled politely and said, "Nah, Dad. We just call someone now. Just call someone." As if self-reliance was something quaint and outdated. And Elise, my baby girl. She used to call me before bed when she was little, whispering stories into the receiver. She stopped by less and less, and when she did, she was always in a hurry. Always half present, checking her watch, looking at her phone. Once, I asked if she wanted to stay for dinner, her favorite, shepherd's pie. She smiled and said, "Can't, Dad. I'm doing keto." I didn't even know what the hell keto meant. I started noticing something else, too. Whenever money came up, conversations shifted. Aaron would say things like, "You've got that big house all to yourself, huh?" Or Elise would ask casually, "You ever think about downsizing?" Tommy once joked that he should have charged me interest on that recliner they gave me years ago. They laughed. I did too. But it sat wrong in my gut. They'd talk over me more often. Finish my sentences. Correct my memories. Melanie once said, "You sure that's how it happened?" when I was telling a story from my wedding day. My wedding day. As if she knew better than me. And then there was the phone. I'd call and get voicemail. Text and get a thumbs up emoji. Or worse, nothing. Elise said once, I didn't respond because I didn't have the energy. I nodded, but something inside me started to quiet. I didn't say anything. Not yet. I didn't want to be dramatic, or worse, needy. I kept telling myself they were busy. That the world was different now. That people didn't make time the way they used to. But deep down, I started feeling like a guest in the family I built with my own two hands. I stopped offering advice unless asked. I stopped planning dinners, holidays, gatherings. They'd make other plans anyway. Plans I only heard about after the fact, if at all. One Thanksgiving, Aaron showed up an hour late and said, "Oh, I thought we were doing it at Elisa's this year." He wasn't even embarrassed. Just shrugged and handed me a cold pie from the store. I sat alone that night, the turkey untouched, the candles burned down to stubs. The old living room where we used to open presents became quiet. The hallway echoes longer these days. The fridge stays fuller longer because no one's around to eat the leftovers. I started talking to Marjorie more often. Out loud. I'd stand in the garden and whisper, "Are you seeing this? Are you proud of me still?" Some days, I imagined her sitting in her chair, shaking her head gently with that tired smile of hers. The shift wasn't loud. It wasn't cruel. But it was steady. And it made something inside me wilt. They didn't see it. Or maybe they did and just didn't care. It was Elisa's birthday. Her 40th. I remembered because I'd been thinking for weeks about what to get her, settled on an old charm bracelet I'd kept since she was 16, still tucked in Marjorie's drawer. Each charm was tied to a memory, her ballet recital, her first trip to the lake, the night we camped under the stars and she swore she'd never leave my side. I had it polished, boxed, even tied it with one of Marjorie's old ribbons. I showed up to the party uninvited. Not because I wasn't welcome, at least, I didn't think I wasn't, but because I hadn't been told about it. I found out through a neighbor who saw the Facebook invite posted by Aaron's wife. "Guess they assumed you'd be there," she'd said. The party was at Elisa's house, a sleek, modern place that always smelled like lavender and something expensive. I knocked once. Then twice. Finally, Aaron opened the door and froze. "Dad," he said, surprised like I was the one being rude. "I brought something for Elise," I said, lifting the box. He hesitated, then moved aside. "Come in." The place was packed, people laughing, music playing, glasses clinking. Balloons said, "Fabulous at 40, and there was even a catering staff handing out tiny foods on toothpicks. It was all a bit much, but I smiled and wove my way through. When Elise saw me, her face didn't light up like I hoped. She gave a polite smile and leaned in for a hug that barely touched my shoulders. "Oh, Dad. You made it." I handed her the box. "Something old. I thought you might remember it." She opened it slowly, eyes landing on the charm bracelet. For a second, I saw something flicker, nostalgia, maybe, but it passed. "Oh, wow. This is vintage," she said. Then she set it on the side table like a flyer she didn't plan to read. She didn't put it on. I stood near the hallway while everyone else mingled. People I didn't recognize gave me those quick, polite nods you give someone you assume is the help. I tried starting conversations, but most fizzled after 2 sentences. It felt like I was standing behind glass, present but invisible. And then came the moment that cracked something in me. They were taking group photos, siblings, spouses, grandkids. Elise stood in the center, holding a glittery 40 sign, everyone crowding around. I stepped forward, smiling, ready to join. Melanie turned to me and said, lightly but firmly, "Oh, we're doing immediate family first." I blinked. "I am immediate family." She smiled again, this time tighter. "Of course you are, but, just the younger generation for this one." I stepped back. Not wanting to make a scene. Not wanting to ruin Elisa's night. I stood by the archway while the flash went off, while they laughed and shouted names, while Aaron's son made a face and everyone roared. No one called me back in. No one even noticed I was gone when I slipped out 15 minutes later. I sat in my truck with the windows down, the bracelet box still sitting on the side table inside. That ribbon, Marjorie's ribbon, was lying next to an empty wine glass like trash. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling until morning, listening to the silence press in around me. Something had broken. It wasn't anger. Not really. It was grief. Because that night I understood what I had become to them. A guest. A name. A burden they carried politely, but not proudly. I didn't call them the next day. I didn't text. I waited to see if anyone would check in. If Elise would thank me. If Aaron would say sorry. If Tommy would at least ask if I made it home okay. But nothing came. Not a word. A week passed. 2. I thought about throwing out the photos in the hallway. I didn't. But I did take them down, one by one, and placed them gently into a box in the attic. I needed space to think. To remember who I had been before I was sidelined in my own story. And I started to wonder, if they could forget me at a party, could they forget me entirely? It was early spring when I heard them. I wasn't supposed to. I had dozed off in the sunroom, the old one with the drafty window and the wicker chair that creaks like a groaning ship. I'd been sorting through Marjorie's recipe cards, trying to decide if I had the heart to cook her lemon chicken again. Somewhere between rosemary and thyme, I nodded off. The voices woke me. Muffled at first, coming from the kitchen. I sat quietly, still hidden by the corner wall, the chair just out of their line of sight. Tommy and Melanie. She won't say no, Tommy said, a little too confidently. He's not in his right mind half the time anymore. You saw the photos. He put mayonnaise in the coffee pot last week. Melanie laughed. I know. But if we push too hard, he'll get stubborn. We need to make it seem like his idea. Assisted living is the best option. He can't stay in that house by himself. I stopped breathing. Besides, Melanie went on, once he's settled in, we can start prepping the house. I already talked to that realtor, Denise something. She thinks we could get a strong offer if we make a few updates. Tommy's voice again, a bit lower. And the will? You said he hasn't changed it since Mom died? Not officially. But you know how those old types are, they stick to the old paperwork like it's sacred. We just need him to sign that new draft you left in his drawer. The drawer. My study drawer. I felt my stomach twist. I'll talk to Aaron next week. Tommy said. He'll go along with it if we make it sound like it's what's best for Dad. And Elise? Melanie asked. She'll fold. She always does. I didn't move. I couldn't. My body felt locked in place, like something heavy had settled on my chest. I waited until their voices faded and the front door clicked shut. Then I stood. Walked to my study. Slowly. Hands shaking like I had the chills. Opened the drawer. There it was. A stack of papers tucked between some old tax returns and a postcard Marjorie had once sent me from Maine. The top sheet read, Revised Durable Power of Attorney and Property Transfer Agreement. No note. No explanation. Just quiet betrayal in black and white. I sat in my chair, the one Elise used to curl up in while reading Nancy Drew books. I held the papers like they might bite me. They were trying to move me out. Behind my back. Using my own confusion, my own age, my own grief as their reasoning. Not once had any of them asked me how I felt. What I wanted. What this house meant to me. To their mother. To our family. I could still hear Marjorie's voice in my head, always read the fine print, Frank. Even from the people you love. I stood and walked the house slowly that night. Room to room. My hands brushing door frames, old furniture, Marjorie's garden gloves still on the hook in the shed. In the corner of the living room sat her sewing basket, untouched since the day she folded the last napkin. The smell of lavender and starch clung to it like memory. I sat down and opened one of her old journals. Marjorie had always kept notes, thoughts, recipes, quiet dreams. On the first page of one entry she wrote. This house is built on patience, sweat, and love. If the kids ever forget that, remind them. I closed the book. That night, I didn't sleep much. Instead, I began watching more carefully. Aaron dropped by 2 days later to check on me. I smiled, offered him coffee, and listened. He asked if I was feeling tired lately. If the house was getting to be too much. If I ever felt confused, I answered with the same quiet tone I'd used when they were toddlers trying to sneak candy from the cupboard. I'm just fine, son. And I saw it in his face, disappointment. Like he'd come hoping I'd confirm their story. After he left, I called the lawyer. Marjorie's lawyer. Mr. Bell. He'd helped us close on this house in 1984. Helped write our original wills. We hadn't spoken since the funeral. When I told him who I was, he paused. Well now, he said slowly. You were never the kind of man to call unless it mattered. It matters now, I said. Have you ever felt betrayed by your own family? Let us know in the comments. I didn't blow up. That's not how I was raised. You don't yell when someone slams a door in your face, you stand still, wait for the wind to pass, and then open it yourself. Calmly. That's what I told myself the morning I invited Tommy over. I said the faucet was leaking again, even though it wasn't. Just needed a reason he'd believe. He showed up an hour late, smelling like expensive cologne and looking at his phone the whole time. Faucet's fine, he said after 2 minutes. You sure you're not imagining things again, Dad? There it was. That word again. Imagining. He'd said it before. They all had. In that gentle, patronizing tone, like I was a misplaced memory floating around in their busy lives. I wanted to talk, I said. I kept my voice even. Sat across from him at the kitchen table, just like I used to when he was a boy getting scolded for cheating on a spelling test. Oh, he said, glancing up. I found those papers. The power of attorney. Property draft. The listing you talked to Denise about. He blinked. Just once. But it was enough. You went through my things? No, I said. You left them in my house. That makes them mine. He gave that little half-laugh, the one that people use when they think they're still in control. Look, Dad, we're just trying to help. The house is old. You're alone. You forget things. We're doing this for you. That's when I leaned forward. Don't lie to me, son. I've forgotten a few birthdays, sure. Maybe even left the stove on once or twice. But I remember who I am. And I sure as hell remember what this house means. Tommy shifted in his seat. You don't get it. We're trying to plan ahead. You always said a good man plans ahead. Planning with someone is different than planning around them, I said. You didn't ask. You decided. His face tightened. You're blowing this out of proportion. It's not like we're stealing. You were ready to move me out behind my back. Silence. Then he muttered, Melanie said this would happen. I let that hang in the air. She said you'd get defensive. Emotional. I stood up, slow and steady. Walked to the window and looked out at Marjorie's rose garden. I'm not emotional, Tom. I'm disappointed. He didn't say anything for a long time. I didn't mean for it to go this way, he said, quieter now. But we thought. I mean, the house is worth a lot. We could use the money. Elise is still paying off her divorce lawyer, and Aaron's got the new baby coming. I turned to him. So you thought I'd what? Sign my life away? Sit in some beige room while strangers tear this place apart? He stood too, but he looked smaller than I remembered. You make everything so hard. We're just trying to keep things moving. Things? I asked. Things? He opened his mouth, then shut it. And I saw it, that flicker of recognition. That tiny flash where he realized what he'd said. Maybe even what he'd become. You need to go, I said, pointing to the door. Dad. Now. He left. No goodbye. Just the slam of the screen door. That night, I found myself walking down the block. just pacing. Trying to shake off the ache in my chest. That feeling of being discarded like a worn-out shoe. "Frank," someone called. I turned. It was Mrs. Delaney, from 2 houses down. Late 70s, widowed like me. She waved from her porch. "Everything okay?" I hesitated. "Not really." She came down the steps and stood beside me in the street. "I heard yelling earlier. And I saw that boy of yours leave." I looked at her, eyes tired. "They want to sell the house. Move me out." She frowned. "Oh, Frank. I built that porch with Marjorie's brother," I said, half to myself. "Stained every plank by hand. And they're planning renovations." She touched my arm gently. "You're not crazy. You're not forgetful. You're grieving. And you're right to be hurt." That kindness nearly broke me. I nodded once, swallowed hard, and turned home. The next morning, I made 2 calls, one to Mr. Bell, and one to the local notary. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to fight. I was going to prepare. And next time, they wouldn't see it coming. Mr. Bell hadn't aged much, at least not in the ways that mattered. Still had the sharp eyes, the polished shoes, and that slow, deliberate way of speaking that made you feel like every word was weighed twice before it came out. His office smelled like cedar and dust, just like I remembered. I sat down across from him, the same chair I'd used when Marjorie and I first signed our wills over 3 decades ago. Back then, we were invincible. We believed our love would carry through anything, that our children would honor our home like we did. Bell folded his hands and looked at me. "You sure about this, Frank?" I nodded. "I don't make moves unless I've thought them through." He gave a slight smile. "That's what I remember about you. That and your wife's lemon cake." I managed a smile too. "She wrote you a recipe card, didn't she?" He opened a drawer and pulled it out, edges curled, yellowed with age. "Still have it. Can't bring myself to throw it away." I looked at the handwriting. Marjorie's loops, her little hearts over every I. A lump formed in my throat, but I cleared it. "I want to update the will," I said. "Take the kids off." He raised an eyebrow but didn't interrupt. "Leave the house to the community shelter. Marjorie always talked about how this place needed somewhere for battered women to go. I think she'd approve. And if the kids contest it? That's the next part." I leaned forward. "I want a clause, ironclad. If they try to fight it, everything, including the house, goes straight to the state or to charity. Nothing to them." He whistled softly. "That's a scorched earth approach." "No," I said. "It's peace of mind. I gave them everything, time, money, love. And they spent the last few years deciding what part of me they could sell off. I won't have them tearing this place apart when I'm gone." He nodded slowly. "All right. We'll draft it carefully. I'll make sure it holds up." We spent the next 2 hours reviewing every asset. The house. The land. The small savings I'd tucked away, and the life insurance policy Marjorie insisted I keep even after retirement. I wanted a trust set up too, for upkeep, repairs, and the garden. "Make sure they keep her roses alive," I said. Bell typed that in without even asking twice. When it came time to sign, I stared at the line for a long time. My hand trembled a little. Not out of doubt, but grief. I'd raised 3 children in this house. I'd tucked them in, patched their scraped knees, held them through fevers and broken hearts. And now, I was signing a document that would keep them out. "I ever tell you what Marjorie said when we moved in here?" I asked, pen still hovering. Bell shook his head. "She said, if this house ever starts feeling cold, we'll warm it up again. Even if it's just us." He nodded. She had that way about her. I signed. And I felt something shift. Not anger. Not even sadness. Just stillness. Like I'd finally stopped waiting for something that would never come. When I walked out of that office, the sun hit different. The world didn't feel lighter, exactly, but I did. I drove back home, windows down, radio low. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw Aaron's car parked nearby. He was waiting on the porch, cradling a baby carrier. His new son, I assumed. I hadn't met him yet. I stepped out and nodded. Didn't know you were coming. Thought I'd surprise you, he said. Introduce you to Micah. I looked at the little bundle. Tiny fists. Red face. A yawn so wide it nearly split his cheeks. He's beautiful, I said. Looks like Elise when she was born. Aaron smiled, then looked down. Hey, about the stuff with Tommy and the papers. Don't, I said, holding up a hand. Not today. He blinked. Okay. I softened. You're welcome to visit. With the baby. But no more games, Aaron. You understand? He nodded. Yeah. I do. He left a little while later. Didn't push. Didn't pry. Just waved once from the driveway. That night, I sat at Marjorie's old writing desk. The will copy was in my hand, the ink still fresh. I stared at it for a long time before I tucked it into the lockbox with our wedding rings, her letters, and that lavender sachet she used to keep in her drawers. I whispered, I did it, Marjorie. I finally drew the line. And for the first time in years, I slept soundly. I didn't think they'd move so fast. I figured the will would buy me time. A buffer. But snakes don't wait long once they smell warmth. It started with a knock. 2 men in polo shirts stood on my porch, clipboards in hand, one of them chewing gum with his mouth open. We're from Kettering Realty, the taller one said. Here to take preliminary measurements before the open house. I blinked. Excuse me? He double-checked the address. Frank Thatcher, right? Your son Aaron scheduled the appraisal. I didn't invite them in. I told them to get off my property. They hesitated until I stepped forward and said it again, louder. This time, with steel in my voice. They left, muttering something about wasting time. I closed the door and locked it, though I'd never needed to in all these years. 10 minutes later, I called Aaron. Straight to voicemail. Called Tommy. Same thing. I stared at the wall for what felt like hours. Something in me went cold. Not angry. Not afraid. Just done. They weren't just planning. They were acting. Without me. In full confidence that I wouldn't resist. Like I was already gone. Like my home was theirs to rearrange. I opened my safe. Pulled out the will. The trust documents. The clause. Then I reached for the envelope I'd prepared weeks ago. A letter addressed to my children. 1 page. Typed. Calm. It laid out exactly what I'd changed. What they'd forfeited. And why. I slipped it into my bag, along with the documents, and made a list. People I trusted. People who'd seen things. Friends from church. The neighbor who overheard the plans. Mr. Bell. Even Mrs. Delaney. I didn't want a war. I wanted witnesses. That night, I wandered out to the garden. Marjorie's roses were blooming early this year, white and crimson, her favorites. I bent down to trim one, and something sharp pricked my finger. A thorn. Tiny, but enough to draw blood. I laughed. Because that's what it was. A reminder. Beauty wasn't soft. It had edges. And so did I. I spent the next 2 days packing up certain things, important papers, photo albums, even the old camcorder with years of tapes. Not because I was leaving, but because I didn't want anything left for them to sift through later. Let them walk into empty rooms and wonder where everything went. By Thursday, I was ready. Then came the final call. Elise. She hadn't phoned in weeks. Not even a text after I visited her birthday party. But that day, she called, chipper as ever. Hey Dad. Just checking in. How are things? I played along. Oh, not bad. Doing some spring cleaning. Oh nice, she said. Listen, the boys and I were thinking, it might be smart to look into that assisted living place we toured. Remember? Golden Pines? I didn't remember. Because I'd never agreed to any of it. She went on, they have an opening, and we think it'd be a good idea to get you moved in before summer. They even let you bring your own recliner. My recliner. The one they gave me years ago, back when birthdays still mattered. I asked, and what happens to the house? She hesitated. Well, we'd keep it in the family, of course. Maybe rent it out. Or flip it. It'd be a great investment. There it was. I could almost hear them dividing it up already. Picking paint colors. Knocking down walls. Erasing every trace of me and Marjorie like we were smudges on their clean, new life. I see, I said quietly. Don't be upset, Dad, she said. We're just trying to help. I hung up without another word. I sat there in silence for a long while. Then I stood, walked to the closet, and took out the suit I hadn't worn since Marjorie's funeral. Still smelled like cedar and mothballs. I dusted it off, laid it on the bed, and pressed the sleeves with my hands. Tomorrow, I'd put it on again. Not for mourning. But for something else. The graduation party was at Elisa's again. Her oldest, Kara, was finishing college. I wasn't invited. I wasn't even mentioned. But I knew it was happening. Facebook again. I saw the post from Melanie's account, all hashtags and filters, with the caption, celebrating our future. Family first. Family first. I ironed my suit. The same charcoal gray I wore to Marjorie's service, the same one I stood in while burying the only woman who ever understood me completely. I polished my shoes, tucked the documents into a manila folder, and put the envelope marked, "To my children," in my breast pocket. The garden roses weren't ready for cutting, but I took one anyway. Wrapped the stem in damp paper towel, slid it into my inner coat pocket. The sky was soft and blue when I arrived. Their cars filled the driveway, Tommy's shiny truck, Aaron's SUV, Elisa's hybrid. I parked down the street. Walked slowly. I could hear the music before I reached the lawn. Laughter. Glasses clinking. Someone yelling, speech. I didn't knock. I walked through the gate and stepped into the yard like I still belonged. For a moment, no one noticed me. They were gathered around a long table, Kara standing at the center with a sash and balloons tied to her chair. She looked radiant, proud. Just like Elise did at that age. Aaron saw me first. His face dropped, lips tightening around the rim of his beer. Tommy followed. Elise turned when the murmur spread. I waited until there was silence. Then I spoke. Afternoon, everyone. Sorry to interrupt. A few people smiled politely, assuming I was the dotty old grandpa giving a toast. I won't take long, I said, stepping closer. I pulled the manila folder from under my arm and laid it gently on the table beside the cake. Inside this folder, I said calmly, is my final will and testament. Dated. Signed. Witnessed. Tommy stepped forward. Dad, this isn't the time. No, I said, holding up a hand. "You've had your time. Now you can listen." I turned slightly, voice clear. "I know about the meetings. The papers in my drawer. The phone calls to realtors. The plan to move me into some hallway smelling of bleach and forgetfulness." Gasps now. Real confusion on some faces. Shock on others. Aaron started, "We didn't." "You did," I cut in. "You just thought I wouldn't find out. Or that I'd be too feeble to stop you." I took the envelope from my pocket and handed it to Elise. "This is for all three of you. A letter explaining why, after a lifetime of sacrifices, I've removed you from my will." Her hands shook slightly. She didn't open it. I looked around at the guests, friends, extended family, neighbors. "This house you've all heard about, the one they were planning to sell? It's not going to them. It's been deeded to the Marjorie Thatcher Community Trust." More murmurs. Aaron's face went pale. "You can't be serious." "I'm entirely serious." I turned to Kara, who looked heartbroken. "Congratulations on your graduation, sweetheart. Your grandmother would be proud. I only wish I'd been invited." She looked down. I didn't blame her. This wasn't her doing. Melanie muttered, "This is a stunt." I smiled faintly. "No. This is clarity." I took the rose from my pocket and placed it gently beside the cake. "Marjorie's favorite," I said. She loved parties. But she also loved honesty. No one moved. No one knew what to say. And in that silence, I felt something leave me. Like setting down a heavy suitcase after a long, thankless journey. I nodded once to the room, then turned and walked away. Slow. Dignified. No one stopped me. Not even my children. Do you think the father made the right choice? Comment and don't forget to like and subscribe for more true life stories. The day after the party, the phone stayed quiet. Not a call. Not a message. Not even a passive-aggressive email from Melanie. And in that silence, something strange happened. I didn't feel regret. I felt peace. It was like standing in a room where a loud, buzzing appliance had been running for years, and suddenly someone unplugged it. The quiet wasn't empty. It was clean. I poured myself a cup of coffee, real coffee, not whatever trendy beans Elise once insisted on. I sat in Marjorie's old chair by the window and watched the morning light settle on her roses. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was waiting for anything. No expectations. No tiptoeing around feelings. No rehearsing polite responses to questions that weren't really questions. Just breath. Still, the town buzzed. That much I couldn't avoid. Mrs. Delaney came by with banana bread and wide eyes. "You really did it, huh?" I nodded. Didn't plan to make a scene. Just ran out of corners to back into. She laughed gently. "People are talking." I figured. Some say you embarrassed them. Others say you're brave. I sipped my coffee. Both might be true. She stayed a while. We sat on the porch like old friends, and for once, we didn't talk about the past. We talked about what could still be done. That's how I knew something in me had shifted. That night, I walked the back garden path, my favorite route. The stones were uneven, but I'd memorized them like the lines on Marjorie's face. I stopped at the bench we installed after her first surgery. There, beneath a weeping willow, I sat and spoke aloud. "I did it, Marge." I didn't yell. Didn't accuse. Just told the truth. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves, and I swear I felt something warm move past me. The next day, one of my old coworkers stopped by. Charlie. We'd worked together 30 years ago laying pipe for the city. He showed up with a six-pack and a smile. Hell of a story going around, he said. You came to rub it in? He shook his head. Came to say I'm proud of you. Took guts. We sat on the porch, talked about how fast the world had moved, how quiet our homes had gotten. Charlie never had kids, but he knew about loss. His wife died 2 years back. I kept her knitting bag by the fireplace, he said. Haven't touched it. Just doesn't feel right. I told him about Marjorie's journal. Her lemon cake recipe still sitting in Belle's office. We talked until the sun dipped low, and for the first time in a while, I laughed, really laughed. That belly-deep kind that cracks something open in you. A few days later, the pastor from Marjorie's church dropped by. He'd heard the rumors, of course. Just wanted to check in, he said. Some people say you've turned bitter. I'm not bitter, I told him. I'm awake. He didn't argue. Instead, he asked, what are you going to do now, Frank? I looked around. The house. The garden. The echoes in the hallway. And I said, I think it's time this place stopped being a museum. The pastor tilted his head. What do you mean? I mean, it should live again. Be filled with voices. With purpose. He nodded slowly. You're not done. Not yet, I said. Not by a long shot. That night, I slept with the windows open. I wanted the breeze to carry her scent back in, lavender and old paper. And as I drifted off, I thought not of my children, but of what this house could still become. It started with the attic. That's where Marjorie kept everything, her boxes labeled in cursive, her sewing projects in canvas totes, old Christmas ornaments wrapped in yellowed newspaper from 1982. I hadn't opened half of them since she passed. The air up there smelled like cedar and history. But one morning, I stood at the foot of the attic stairs and said aloud, time to let the light in. And I climbed. Box by box, I went through the past, her aprons, my father's army medals, the kids' baby shoes, a stack of coloring books with Elisa's handwriting scribbled on the covers. I kept some things. Donated others. I wasn't purging. I was preparing. Because I'd decided what this house needed, not silence. Not storage. People. Real people. Not blood, not burdened by expectations or inheritance. People with worn hands and tired eyes. People who needed what this house once gave me, rest. Safety. Dignity. I called Pastor Harris again. Remember that idea Marjorie had? I asked. About turning the house into a shelter for caregivers? I do, he said. She always said love shouldn't stop at your own doorstep. Well, I said, I think I'm ready to open the door. We met the next day, this time with legal pads and coffee. I laid out my vision, not just a shelter, but a resting place. A transition house for people who'd given their lives caring for others, nurses between jobs, hospice workers burned out from loss, widows like Mrs. Delaney who just needed time to land on their feet again. He listened. Asked questions. Took notes. By the end of the week, we had a plan. First, we filed to officially register Marjorie's House as a non-profit. Belle helped push the paperwork through. She'd be proud of you, Frank, he said. More than proud. Then came the logistics. I had to make room, physically and emotionally. I cleared out the guest rooms, opened the drapes, replaced the old mattresses with new ones. The local hardware store donated paint when they heard the story. Volunteers from the church came by with brushes, tools, and casseroles. It wasn't grand. But it was alive. I moved slowly, but with purpose. Each brushstroke on the hallway wall felt like reclaiming something. I replaced the cracked tiles in the laundry room. Rewired the porch lights. Painted over the faint scuff marks from when Aaron used to drag his toy trucks across the floor. I didn't erase the memories. But I made space for new ones. Soon, the first inquiries came in. Pastor Harris put out quiet feelers. No flashy ads. Just word of mouth. One was a hospice nurse named Lillian. Mid-50s. Worn to the bone after caring for her mother for 6 years. She needed 3 months to get back on her feet. Another was an elderly couple, Mary and Joe, who had lost their rental when their landlord raised the rent. Joe had served in Vietnam. Mary baked cinnamon bread on Sundays. I prepared rooms for each of them. Fresh sheets. A welcome note. Flowers on the nightstand, cut from Marjorie's garden, of course. On the front door, I put up a sign in simple lettering. Welcome home. Stay as long as you need. One afternoon, as I was fixing a hinge on the screen door, I heard footsteps. It was Kara, Elisa's daughter. She walked slowly up the path, holding a grocery bag. "Hi, Grandpa," she said, eyes cautious. I stood, brushing off my hands. "Hey, sweet pea. Didn't expect you." She looked at the porch, then inside the open front door. "Mom said you're turning the house into a home for strangers." "Not strangers," I said. "Just family I haven't met yet." She looked down. "She's upset. So is Uncle Tommy." "I know," I said. "I think they thought you'd come around. That maybe it was just a statement." I nodded. It was a statement. And a beginning. She handed me the bag. "I brought some of Grandma's old teacups from Mom's cabinet. I thought maybe the ladies staying here might want them." I took the bag slowly, my throat tightening. "Thank you. That means more than you know." We stood in silence for a while. Then I said, "Want to come in? Have some lemonade?" She nodded. And just like that, the house felt warmer. It wasn't full yet, not of people, not of laughter, but it was getting there. And this time, no one would be forgotten. The first thing I noticed was the sound. The silence was gone. Now, there were voices, soft, tired, grateful voices, moving through the house like gentle wind. You don't realize how heavy silence is until someone breathes into it. Lillian was the first to move in. She arrived with a single suitcase and eyes that looked older than her years. I showed her to the northeast room, Marjorie's old sewing space. We'd repainted it a soft green. I'd placed a small bouquet of roses on the nightstand. She paused at the door. "It smells like something I used to know." "Lavender and lemon oil," I said. "My wife's favorites." Lillian turned to me. "Thank you." A week later, Mary and Joe arrived. They came with 2 bags, a dog-eared Bible, and a worn-out radio they refused to part with. Joe limped slightly, but his grip was strong when he shook my hand. "I never expected to live in a place with hardwood floors again," he said, laughing. "Feels too fancy." "You've earned it," I told him. We shared meals at the long oak table I once refinished for Elisa's 7th birthday. It had been scratched, colored on, used for science fair posters and bills. Now, it was covered with homemade bread, soup pots, and mismatched plates. And laughter. Not the polite kind. The belly-deep, slow-starting kind that rises when people start to feel human again. Every night, someone helped with dishes. No one was assigned. It just happened. Some mornings, I'd wake up early to find Lillian watering Marjorie's roses. She never asked. She just knew. On Thursdays, Joe would read aloud from the paper while Mary baked muffins with too much cinnamon, just how Marjorie liked them. And on Sundays, we started something new. We'd gather on the porch with lemonade and tell stories. Not of loss. Of survival. Of kindness. Of moments when strangers became family. One night, Kara returned. This time, she brought an apron and her mother's recipe box. "Thought I'd cook dinner for everyone," she said. "Grandma always said food fixes more than bandages." She made spaghetti, overcooked the noodles and under-seasoned the sauce. But it was the best damn meal we'd had all month. Afterward, she stayed and listened to Joe talk about the war. She even asked to see Marjorie's garden. We sat together by the rose beds, and she said quietly, "I think I get it now." I looked at her. "The house," she said. "It was never about the walls." "No," I said. "It was about what lived inside them." She squeezed my hand. "I don't know if Mom or the others will come around." "They don't need to," I said. "But you did. That's enough." The next morning, I found a note under my coffee mug. From Lillian. "I haven't felt safe in a long time. I do now. Thank you, Frank." I read it twice. Folded it carefully. Tucked it inside Marjorie's journal. That afternoon, a young man named Tyler came by. 24. Soft-spoken. A CNA who'd been couch-surfing since his mother passed. Pastor Harris had sent him. "I can clean. I'm handy. I don't need much," he said. I looked around the living room. The rocking chair, the fireplace, the sound of Joe humming in the kitchen. "You're already home," I told him. He moved into the back room. That night, the dinner table was full. Laughter spilled out the windows. Someone turned on the old radio and found a jazz station. We ate in candlelight because the overhead bulb had burnt out, and no one cared enough to fix it yet. After dishes, Tyler asked if he could plant vegetables in the side yard. Said his mom always kept a garden. I told him yes. Told him Marjorie would have loved that. Then I stepped outside, sat on the porch swing, and looked out at the quiet street. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel old. I felt whole. Not because I had reclaimed my house, but because I had filled it with something better than inheritance. Error in message stream. It was a rainy Tuesday when Elise showed up. No call. No warning. Just her silver car rolling up the gravel driveway like it had so many years ago when she used to come by for Sunday supper, arms full of laundry and her youngest wrapped around her hip. I was on the porch, oiling the swing chain. The creak had returned, not the loud kind, just enough to be noticed. Enough to remind you time keeps moving whether you're ready or not. She stepped out slowly, her heels sinking slightly into the soft earth. "Hey, Dad," she said, lifting her coat collar against the drizzle. "Elise," I nodded. "Didn't expect you." She looked thinner. Or maybe just older. Her hair was tied back the way Marjorie used to wear it when she was nervous. "Can I come in?" I wiped my hands on a rag. "Of course." We stepped into the living room. Lillian was arranging flowers on the hallway table. Tyler nodded politely from the kitchen before slipping out the back. Elise glanced around. "You've changed things." "No," I said, "I just opened the doors." She sat down on the old recliner, the one she and her brothers gave me all those years ago. It squeaked, as always. "I heard what you've been doing," she said. "Kara told me. So did Melanie. And the church. Pretty much everyone, actually." I waited. She looked at her hands. "They're furious. Tommy especially. He says you've been manipulated. That someone talked you into cutting us out." I leaned back. No one talked me into anything. I saw what was happening. And I chose peace. Silence stretched between us. She reached into her bag and pulled out something wrapped in a tea towel. When she opened it, I saw the charm bracelet. The same one I gave her for her 40th birthday, the one she left on the table like it meant nothing. "I found it in a box," she said. "After the party. I don't know why I didn't wear it. I should've. I nodded. I read your letter, she said quietly. Twice. And? I didn't agree with everything. But I understood it. Especially the part about feeling invisible. Her voice cracked slightly. She took a breath. You were right. We got used to you being there. Always helping, always giving. And somewhere along the way, we stopped seeing you as a person. I stayed quiet. She looked up. I'm not here to change your mind. I know the will is done. And I'm not asking you to undo it. I raised an eyebrow. Then why are you here? She hesitated. Then, almost in a whisper, she said, to say sorry. Not just for the house. For getting you. For letting you grieve alone. For making you feel like a problem to be solved. I looked at her, really looked. Her shoulders were trembling slightly. Eyes rimmed red. Not crocodile tears. Real ones. The kind that come after silence has sat too long in a person's heart. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a small photograph, one of Marjorie holding newborn Elise on our porch. She would have wanted better from all of us, I said. But especially you. You were her mirror. Elise took the photo gently. Held it like glass. I miss her every day, she whispered. I know, I said. So do I. We sat in silence a while. The kind that isn't heavy. The kind that's doing the work words can't. After a long pause, she asked, can I visit sometimes? Help out? Maybe bring the kids by. I looked around the house, at the polished floors, the painted walls, the scent of cinnamon and roses. You can, I said. But not as a daughter expecting forgiveness. She nodded. Then how? As someone willing to earn trust back, I said. Like everyone else who lives here. She nodded again. Firmer this time. Before she left, she placed the charm bracelet on the entryway table beside a vase of daisies. She would have worn it every day, she said. Grandma, I mean. She would have, I agreed. Elise stepped onto the porch and paused. You were a better father than I was a daughter. I never stopped being your father, I said. But I did stop waiting. She walked to her car and drove away without looking back. But I knew she'd return. And next time, she wouldn't come empty-handed. Have you ever had to choose peace over family? Let us know in the comments. The sign went up on a Saturday. Simple white wood, hand-painted lettering, hung just above the porch rail. Marjorie's house, a place to rest, a place to rise. Lillian held one end while Tyler screwed in the last bolt. Joe stood by with a thermos of sweet tea, nodding his approval. Mary cried the moment it was finished, wiping her cheeks with her apron. Even the rose bushes, just beginning their second bloom, seemed to lean a little closer toward the house. We held a small opening ceremony, not grand, not loud. Just right. Chairs circled in the front yard. A table with banana bread, coffee, and 2 pitchers of lemonade. Pastor Harris offered a prayer, brief and warm. He quoted Marjorie's favorite passage, "Do not forget to show hospitality to strangers, for by so doing some people have shown hospitality to angels without knowing it." I stood to speak last. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed to. I looked out at the faces, some I knew well, some just getting familiar. Neighbors, volunteers, board members, even a few from the church who hadn't spoken to me since the confrontation. They came anyway. And in the back row, behind the maple tree, stood Kara and Elise. No applause. No tears. Just quiet presence. I cleared my throat, voice a little rough with age and emotion. This house was never just wood and walls. It was built on burnt fingers from cooking with kids, late-night arguments that ended in forgiveness, quiet prayers said by my wife at that window right there. I pointed toward the kitchen. This house held my grief, I continued. And now, I wanted to hold someone else's healing. I looked down for a moment, gathered myself, then smiled. When Marjorie passed, I thought my life had already ended too. But grief isn't the end. It's the place where roots dig deep. And if you stay long enough, something grows again. There was a long silence, not heavy, just respectful. Then someone clapped. Then another. Then the whole yard joined in, gentle but steady. After the ceremony, I found Elise walking the side path by herself. She stopped near the vegetable garden Tyler had started, watching a bee hover over the basil. "She'd be proud of this," she said softly. "She'd be proud of you for showing up," I replied. She nodded. "Kara wants to volunteer. She said she could help with meals or cleaning. She'd be welcome." We stood together, not talking. Just existing. It was enough. That evening, after everyone had left, I sat alone on the porch swing. The creek was still there. I let it be. In my lap was Marjorie's journal, now fuller than before, with notes from residents, little thank you cards, and pressed flowers from her garden. I opened to the last page I had written in. It read, "You were the heart of this home." I only kept it beating. Now, others have found their rhythm here too. I hope you see it. I hope you smile. The sun dipped low. The porch light clicked on. Inside, I could hear Mary humming in the kitchen. Lillian was helping Joe with the crossword. Tyler's laughter echoed down the hallway as he told a story I couldn't quite catch. The house was full again. Not with blood. But with something better, chosen family. People who saw me. People I saw back. And in that moment, I realized. I hadn't lost my family. I'd simply found it in a different shape. Marjorie's house lived again. And so did I.